And now it is time for this edition of the News Review. In this edition of the News Review, voting is underway in Syria's third parliamentary election since the war began there in 2011. Voters are casting ballots at over 7,400 polling stations across the country. That includes the recently liberated militant strongholds of eastern Ghouta and southern Idlib. Elections are being held in those areas for the first time in nearly a decade. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's Ba'ath Party is expected to win a majority in the 250-seat parliament. Candidates were campaigning on tackling inflation and rebuilding the country's battered infrastructure. Millions of Syrians who have fled abroad due to the war are not eligible to vote. The elections were initially planned for April, but they were postponed twice due to the coronavirus pandemic. Now, to discuss that further and also get an update, we are joined by our correspondent Muhammad Ali, who's joining us live from Damascus, and also we're joined by Mr. Saeb Shaath, author and Middle East affairs expert, who's joining us live from Belfast. Let's begin with our correspondent Muhammad Ali for an update. Muhammad Ali, can you tell us more about what's been going on?
Yes, the latest is that the Higher Judicial Committee announced that it will be extending the voting time across the country from 7 p.m. To 11 p.m. local time, which means 4 additional hours have been added so that voters who are not able to come to the electoral centers, which are 7,400 across the country in government-held parts of the country, can come and vote. Of course, I am now at one of the electoral centers over here inside Damascus. Over here you can see that everything has been set since the early hours of the morning. I've been covering actually from over here. There are civilians, there are employees, people from all walks of life are coming to vote for the candidate they believe is qualified and does represent them in order to perhaps implement his agenda. Particularly here we're speaking, Syrians are interested in things like fighting corruption, making their daily lives better. This is what the people are actually asking for, facing all of those challenges, economic challenges and threats by the United States and the West in general. Of course, we have 1,658 candidates competing for 250 seats. What we can also say that according to reports, and those numbers that I'm going to give you right now are only numbers based on the reports we got at 3 p.m. local time over here. At 3 p.m. We got a report from the Judicial Committee over here that 94,000 people is the number of voters in the governorate of Damascus countryside. For example, in Dar'a, 90,000 people voted up till 3 p.m. Local time, and also we have until the time of until 3 p.m. we also have in Dar'a 36,000 people. So more and more people are actually voting, and we have to wait and see until the ballot boxes close until we know the final number of voters.
Thank you very much for that update. Let's bring in Mr. Saeb Shaath. If you could tell us, please, about the significance of these elections, and as our correspondent just mentioned, the long lines of people taking part in these elections, what kind of message are they sending out to the world?
The electors are showing that all people of Syria from all walks of life are standing shoulder to shoulder with their government and their leadership. They're rejecting the sanctions which is imposed on Syria by the US, EU, and Arab reactionary regimes to destabilize the country and starve them. While they telling in their fate when they are going to the election boxes that the West are bluffing their own public opinion and spending the taxpayers of their own countries and strengthening terror in Syria, and calling the terrorists, which they brought and gathered the Western intelligence services from 83 countries and deployed them in Syria, and calling them political opposition, Syrian political opposition. So this is one of the messages. And on the back of such a message, we expected President Bashar al-Assad's political party, al-Ba'ath Party, which is a member of, to win with the alliance of this party, which is a huge alliance in Syria, is to win most of the 250 seats, because the people have showed their trust in such a system, such a regime, which is eliminated from major chunks of the terrorist groups out of Syria. Most of Syria is freed of terrorism because of the steadfastness of the leadership. It didn't defect. It didn't run away and left the people and got the bribes here and there. No, it's strong in Syria. Let's compare in here two issues I want to compare. Syria seen 3 elections in the 9 years of war of terror in Syria. The government and the state tried to maintain the values of democracy and the rights of people to express themselves and to cleanse the state from corruption. While, on the other hand, the stooges, the countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Turkey even, and Qatar, all of these countries who helped in deploying the Zionists and the Americans' plan to destabilize and destroy Syria, they don't hold elections, especially in Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And in Syria, during the 9 years of campaign of war of terror, Syria maintained the internet, maintained all social media, maintained YouTube, even knowingly the terror factions were using it against it. But look in Saudi Arabia, look at UAE, look at Qatar. They are restricted heavily. They monitor people even who are using them. I'll give you one example. When the Saudis trapped and slaughtered the Saudis' opposition journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, they used WhatsApp. That shows you how monitored these social media in there. You cannot even use the function of calling audio or voice to United Arab Emirates or the Saudis. The same thing. So these countries are claiming that Syria is led by a tyrant, who this tyrant unfortunately held elections, maintained the people's rights, and these United States of America stooges deny people from basic rights, like they used to deny the woman from driving in Saudi Arabia, basic rights from using social media, intimidated. This is one example I want to mention here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shaath. Let's go back to Muhammad Ali. As you heard, Mr. Shaath believes that the Ba'ath Party has a good chance of winning these elections. You're on the ground there. Tell us more about the Ba'ath Party and how much do you agree with Mr. Shaath? Do they actually have a chance? And what are their plans for the future of Syria?
Yes, of course, every political party has a program. They're all speaking about reform in general, and they're all speaking about the economic reform and political reform and issuing new laws that will assist the people in their daily lives. Of course, we have to point out that the Ba'ath Arab Socialist Party is the largest and most powerful party in the country. It has the largest number of supporters, at least over here, especially taking into consideration that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, which is widely supported here, is the Secretary General of the Ba'ath Arab Socialist Party. So it is expected that, yes, the Ba'ath Arab Socialist Party could be actually winning the larger number of seats with regards to the overall 250. But at the same time, other political parties that were established throughout the unrest, which are considered as opposition parties, actually internally based, do have the right and have candidates representing them. There are also independent figures as candidates. There are industrialists, businessmen who are also trying to go to the parliament and win a seat in order to perhaps also improve the economic life in Syria, especially to face the challenges and the sanctions that are preventing them from carrying out their businesses and their trade with other countries. Also, a very important note to say is that the Syrian government in general sees this particular elections at this particular timing as a victory. The Syrian Prime Minister said while he was voting over here in Damascus that those elections are actually a political victory. The Syrian Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim also, he said today that the elections are a victory and are a step towards reconstruction. So there are a lot of hopes, especially by the Syrian people, the voters, especially also after the disappointment that they had witnessed from previous parliamentarians throughout the years of war. They were not satisfied with the work of the parliamentarians. They're hoping now that at this time those parliamentarians, those candidates, those who will win, will actually bring something positive that they could feel in their daily lives very soon, especially now with those economic sanctions.
Thank you very much, Muhammad Ali. Let's go back to Mr. Shaath. We're running out of time, but if you could please quickly wrap this discussion up and tell us what are the main challenges that the new parliament will be facing?
See, the main challenges all of Syria and the new parliament are facing, it was the deployment of security in Syria since from the day one, from 2011, with these Arab Spring activists, they call themselves, came out, they start targeting Syrian radar systems, Syria air defense systems, and destroyed most of it. So they opened the skies of Syria in the front of the Israelis' attacks day in, day out. Then the Russians moved in and they tried to deploy S-300. They denied the Syrians to control that. Today there is a signing of a military agreement came between Iran and Syria. This is where the whole thing going to be game changing, this agreement. Iran will supply Syria with exactly the same sort of S-300 and will train them and using them to maintain the Syrian skies. And then that will further strengthen Syria economically as well, with more to counter what they call it the Caesar's Act, which is try to stagnate and starve Syria. So try to shake the grounds underneath the regime which has won the war in terrorism. And this election maintaining that, showing this regime, this country, this state, this government won the war against terrorism. And this alliance today shows that Syria is not dictated to by Russia, and let's have alliance in the resistance camp like Iran and like Hezbollah and the other factions and other states, and it will win the political and economical battle in the near future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saeb Shaath, author and Middle East affairs expert, joining us live from Belfast, and our very own Muhammad Ali bringing us the latest updates from Damascus. We'll be in touch with him to find out more about how these elections roll out and, of course, to get the final results. With that, we come to the end of this edition of the News Review. Thank you for watching and stay tuned with the rest of the bulletin.